Hello, my name's Suzanne. Today I want to show you a technique that you can use to reduce feelings of stress and anxiety or any distressing feelings really that are being caused by overthinking. Now, there are many um, physiological reasons, conditions, illnesses, um, things in the body that can also lead to distressing feelings. And this video is not about that. So things like illnesses, health conditions, um, dysregulated blood sugar can all lead to unpleasant feelings in the body, including anxiety, feelings of stress. But this is not about that. This is specifically about when something has happened and your mind has reacted with a fight or flight response and led to you feeling unpleasant sensations in the body, such as fear, anxiety, stress, grief, sadness, things that we tend to label as negative emotions. And I'm taking an example here from someone I know personally who recently had this experience. And I just want to show you how, first of all, I've broken it down into three parts, the three components that run every time we are triggered into feeling distress. Um, what we often don't notice this because it goes so fast in real time that it just becomes a jumble. It just becomes like this has happened, and I'm feeling this, and I'm thinking this, and it's just a big old mess, and we don't know where to start to try and untangle it and organize it, and then bring some reality in on it, bring in a different perspective. So hopefully today this will um, begin to help you to practice to do that. Okay, so first of all, we've got what we call a trigger or an event, something that's happened, usually externally to us, but not always. Sometimes something happens within the body. You might feel a pain or a discomfort, or you know, you might feel something internally that can be a trigger and can um, trigger the mind or the thoughts and the beliefs, that invisible um, narrative that runs constantly, that part of us that is constantly scanning our environment, looking for potential threat or danger, and then this part of us, this mind, often called survival or fight or flight mind, it remembers past memories of trauma and painful things from the past. It remembers them, modifies that through this current experience, and then projects or predicts a terrible outcome. So it's a very predictive mind, and it uses our past experiences to inform that prediction. It's a bit hair trigger, and it's often, usually not rational. Often it's an overreaction of that mind. So we're often unnecessarily feeling the distress of being in some kind of danger. So when this mind starts to run, um, what it then does is produce feelings in the body, feelings like fear, stress, anger. On this occasion, the person became tearful. We'll go into that now. But these are actual physiological manifestations in the body, so you feel them. So stress hormones are released into the bloodstream to prepare the body for the fight or flight response, which leads to muscle contraction and the diversion of blood supply away from areas that are not essential for its survival. So that's when you start to feel pretty poorly, when you start to feel really uncomfortable in your body. And of course, these days, if you're at work, for example, your body is prepared for fight or flight, you can't do either. If you're in an office at work, as this person is that we're going to look at now, you can't run and you can't fight. So this becomes almost unbearable, you know. The sensations in the body can be really quite overwhelming. So let's have a look at this particular example. So here we have a person who had submitted some work, a project that they'd worked really hard on for a long time, submitted this work to their team, felt relieved that it was over, it was done, and to all intents and purposes believed they'd done a good job. But then got some feedback from their manager: you haven't delivered on the project. Now, other things were said, but my friend, my associate, didn't hear anything else other than this. As soon as they heard this, their mind, their thoughts, their beliefs were instantly activated and unfolded at a rate of knots. And with this internal narrative running, interpreting this statement to mean something bad about them and for them, then what gets triggered in the body are feelings of, in this case, fear, stress, anger, and she became tearful in a sense of overwhelm and frustration and not knowing what to do. She became tearful. So let's have a look. So the area that we need to focus on is this bit, the interpretation of what's just happened. Because this interpretation, this mechanism that instantly jumps in and makes sense of what's happened, this shuts down our ability to be rational and reasoning and use our prefrontal cortex to approach this situation with our adult intelligence and in an equal way, an adult to adult way, with the boss or whoever it is that we're dealing with. And what happens is that she is now catapulted out of her adult state and regressed to a much younger age, where something may be similar, something that the mind, this memory-based mechanism of mind, recognized as that's happened before in some shape or form. This is what it means, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what you have to do about it. And when all that's running, that's when the feelings in the body arise. So you see here we've got three different parts. We've got the triggering event, the stimulus that comes in usually from outside in the form of sights or sounds or through the senses, through the physical senses. We've got this mind that interprets that stimulus to mean something, and in this case it's not a good thing. And this is all running invisibly and silently. We hear it internally, we don't hear it with our ears. We hear it kind of as an internal kind of voice representing reality. And whatever meaning we're putting on that thing becomes our reality. For as long as this narrative runs, this is now our reality. This is our goggles through which we are now seeing the world. And it's these goggles through which we are seeing the world that determine how our body gets to feel about that. So if it's looking like we're in danger, then the body is going to feel stressed, the muscles are going to contract, the internal visceral organs, like the blood supply, is going to be redirected to the limbs, ready for fight or flight, and it feels a bit terrible. If you aren't fighting or running away, you get to feel a bit terrible. So the mind is the bit here that we can influence. We can't influence well, maybe we can to some degree, but usually when we're triggered by something, it's only after it's happened that we realize it's a problem. So often there's nothing we could have done about that to stop it happening. So often we can't influence and we can't control what other people do or say or what happens out there in the world. The feelings over here that arise in the body only arise because we are seeing what has happened in a particular way. So it's this seeing or interpreting what has happened that we need to focus our attention on. Listen in is normally the last thing we want to do, is to listen to this. Normally what we want to do is just get away from it, pretend it hasn't happened, try and dumb it down. Often we'll find ourselves in front of the fridge looking for food, or buying something on Amazon, or scrolling on our phone, or anything to get away from this and the horrible feelings that go with it. So what we're going to have to do now is steel ourselves enough to be able to steer into the skid of this and really hear into what that mind is saying about us, about the situation, and what we have to do. So let's just have a look. This is an example of my friend's internal narrative that was triggered when she heard that statement, "You haven't delivered on the project." Her mind automatically said things to the tune of, "He thinks I'm incompetent, he's being unfair, I've worked so hard and it's not acknowledged. Therefore, that means I'm invisible. That means I'm being diminished. I must be delusional for thinking that I was any good. I have to try harder." But then, so I have to try harder. I have to work harder. I'm not doing well enough. I have to do better. That was the implication of that. And at the same time, what we've also got running is, but there's no point in me trying harder because I am fundamentally incompetent. You think he thinks I'm incompetent. Actually, it's not what he thinks that's the problem. It's what I think. It's what she thinks. It's what you think. It's our what we call core beliefs, our self-concept that was often and formed way back when we were very young. When we were very young and we didn't have much power in the world, and we were bossed about and told what to do all the time, and often in a not very nice or encouraging way. It leads to a self-concept in a young child that they are powerless in the world and therefore incompetent, and that it's somehow shameful. And this is what we get regressed back to. I don't know if you remember starting school, especially if you started school and you were one of the youngest in the year and all the rest of your class were a little bit older than you. And now we're talking months, but at that age, at that stage of life, development in the matter of months is massive. So if you're starting school and your peers are a few months older than you, then they're going to be a lot more competent in some areas, have some skills that you haven't developed yet. This can then lead to, a child can't reason that. A child can't say, "Oh, well, I'll catch up. In 3 months, I'll be tying my own shoelaces." Child doesn't know that. They just think they can do it and I can't. Therefore, I must be lacking in some way. Most children think like that. And this is what we get regressed to when something happens, like a boss telling you, "You haven't done a very good job for some reason and we need you to do it again." That mind suddenly becomes 4 years of age again. You become 4 years old emotionally, psychologically. So these are the kind of thoughts that run in the mind of a 5-year-old. They also become the thoughts that run in the mind of a 25, 35, 45-year-old when something like this happens and triggers you right back into that state again. So there's no point in me trying harder because I'm fundamentally incompetent. And to do so would be to waste my time. I'm kidding myself that I can do better. Therefore, I may as well not bother. I may as well leave the job before I get fired. So now what we've got two sets of demanding thoughts here. One saying, I should try harder. The other saying, well, there's no point because you're not going to do it anyway. So therefore, you may as well not bother and you might as well leave the job. Now, we're being pulled into different directions of what we should do about it. This increases the tension that we end up feeling in the body, because whichever way we do it, that mind is going to say, well, that's not right, that's not right. It shuts down our options. It shuts them down to the two polarities of fight or flight. Actually, that's what it's doing. So I may as well not bother. I should leave the job before I get fired, but then I'll be broke. So therefore, I should stay and make it work. Now, when all this is running invisibly in your mind in the form of internal voices, images, sounds, memories. Often it's other people's voices that we've internalized, often parental voices or teachers or significant caregivers' voices that may have been chastising or not very encouraging. We've internalized those voices often, and they get triggered again in this kind of a situation. So all this is going on, and what we end up feeling is fear, stress, anger, and in this case, tears. So first of all, what you can do if something like this has happened to you, and we all get triggered every day, all of us, this is just the human condition. There's no place to arrive at where this doesn't happen anymore. In fact, we need it to keep us alive. Sometimes it does keep us alive, but oftentimes it's triggered unnecessarily. And being social animals, we are highly sensitive to rejection or potential rejection, disapproval, because historically, as a human in a social group, being ejected from that group probably meant certain death. So I think we've adapted to be very, very sensitive to how we're being perceived by other people and what that might mean for us. And I think, our nervous system or brain or whatever part of it that's responsible hasn't caught up with the fact that we, in our society at least, maybe not in all societies, but in the West largely, we can afford to be disliked by a lot of people and we're still going to be all right. That's probably more realistic these days for most of us. But our nervous system has not caught up with that, and it's still on this hair trigger setting, where it will see the slightest little look of disapproval or inflection in a voice of disapproval and jump to the worst case scenario. So what you can do is identify, if you can, a trigger. What recently has happened that has caused me to feel some distress? Just see if you can pinpoint it right down. Here we've got it right down to the actual words. You haven't delivered on the project. That was one sentence in a run of sentences. That was one sentence. It was that one sentence that stood out for this person and triggered this. So this is the next bit for you to look at. What did my mind, what was the internal narrative predicting that was going to mean for me or about me? So these are some thoughts that we've looked at here. So he thinks I'm incompetent. This is unfair. It's usually disastrous. It's always disastrous, in fact. I'm going to get the sack. People don't like me. It's very extreme. Suspend judgment of it because of its extremity. It can be very extreme, but don't worry about that, okay? Just write it down. Write it down, because already you can just take a little step back from it physically and see it from a different perspective already. This is already, we're seeing it from a different perspective, just writing it out verbatim as it arises, okay? Then, when all that was running, how did I get to feel physically? Now, often in our modern or parlance, we'll use the words feeling and thinking interchangeably as if they're the same thing. They aren't. This is quite an important point, actually, because thoughts and beliefs are invisible. They run internally. They can't be seen. They can't be felt. They are just an internal, mentalized representation of something. Whereas feelings manifest physiologically in the body. You feel your muscles contract, you feel your temperature change, you feel your gut go tight, you feel your shoulders raising up, you feel sick, you feel like you need to run to the toilet. These things are a physiological manifestation of that. So anything physiological goes under the feelings and reaction heading. Okay, now this is my first video on this, and this is the first step. If you're interested, please look out for my next video, in which I will be helping you to rationalize and really consider and examine this narrative on that the thoughts and the beliefs are leveling at you. We really need to slow that down and go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I think that would make this video too long, so I'm going to make another one to that effect. So thank you very much for watching. I look forward to see you next time. Thank you.